welcome back to another Cardinals Off Day podcast. It's been a couple weeks since we were last with you. The Cardinals lost most of those games, but we're here. We're here to talk about that and talk about everything else. When I say we, of course, I'm referring to myself, Ben Godar, but also my podcasting partner, Mr. Ben Humphrey. Ben, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I would just like to point out if there are any front office members with the St. Louis Cardinals organization, they were 2-0 when Ben Godar was in attendance and Dan Chibnall. So I don't want to tell you how to run your organization, but if you want to give someone free season tickets, 2-0, that looks like very projectable, very strong causation there.
Yes, agree. I certainly agree, and I would certainly accept that. I used to be a real journalist who would not accept such things, but those days are well behind me, Ben, and bring on the freebies. So anyway, we got a bunch of things to go through. We got a whole bunch of great listener questions. But as always, we'll kick things off with what have we learned. And Ben, I'm going to just jump in since you kind of teed it up already. You unfortunately were unable to join this year, but myself and Dan, who helps us out in social media, had a chance to head down to St. Louis for the annual Blogger and Podcasters Day, which is always really, it's a great event. I think we're all really appreciative that the team hosts us, and it is. I will say. My favorite part is getting to see some of the great people that write and podcast about the Cardinals. So it was great to see, friends of the pod, Alex Crisafulli and Kyle Reese, Stu Stiles, Daniel Shoptaw, and my cousin Lil Scooter, as well as many others. But the kind of, I guess, centerpiece of the event, of course, is Mo stops in and, takes some questions and chats with us all. And I'm always really kind of impressed at how candid he has been in those conversations. I know you coined, I believe, Mo Speak back in the day, but within, while of course sometimes a degree of Mo Speak familiarity may help one understand it, I certainly felt like and have felt like he continues to be pretty direct with questions that he answers for folks. And so if anybody wants to listen to that whole conversation, it's posted in a few places. I know the Viva Alberto's podcast posted it, so you can listen to the whole conversation there. It is a pretty good conversation, actually. But Ben, in terms of what I learned, the one thing I wanted to just pull out of that and highlight that I thought was interesting, someone kind of asked point blank, at the trade deadline, if it's a buy versus sell situation, who's making the call, you or Heim? Was basically the question. And and Mo said it's probably going to kind of depend on how we're doing right then, and I believe he kind of said something to the effect of if we're doing well as we are right now, again, that was before this most recent losing skid, the idea was that he might be leading that a little bit more, might be looking to add, etc., but certainly allowed that if it was going to be more of a looking to next year, a rebuild situation, that would kind of be more Heim Bloom. Then the one real nuance though I wanted to pull out of that was when he referred to that, he said that would be Heim's team. And so I thought that was kind of interesting, not just, of course, that these two individuals, but that really kind of separate teams within the front office, working, which, of course, we know to a degree. Obviously, Heim Bloom has hired some people. He's got some guys there. But, just using that terminology to me suggested, okay, we really do kind of have like two different camps here. And Michael Gersh should probably get his resume ready if he hasn't already. That's kind of what I took from that. Ben, I don't know, any other thoughts on that or anything Blogger Day related or otherwise, what have you learned?
I have learned that as entertaining as the style of play is to watch for the St. Louis Cardinals team, which is a lot of balls in play relative kind of to what the league is doing overall, both from the pitching staff of the St. Louis Cardinals and by the St. Louis Cardinals. And for folks who don't know, a home run is not a ball in play. So when I say that, I mean the fielders are moving and the fielders are doing things. But So what I have learned is on the offensive side, there are a bunch of people who have been watching Major League Baseball or been participating in it for 30, 40, 50 years who are going to try to tell you that over reliance on the home run leads to inconsistency. But I am here to tell you that over reliance on the single leads to inconsistencies more than home runs, because with a home run, one swing of the bat gets you at least one run. With a single, you usually need at least two swings of the bat, usually three if you're trying to string together things that aren't going to the wall exactly. And so I think we've seen some of that with the St. Louis Cardinals lately, where that lack of power, they're in the bottom third of the league and have been for most of the year in terms of home runs. And when the team has done well offensively, it's when they have been able to string together hits. And occasionally, they will get a home run. But the offensive inconsistencies of the St. Louis Cardinals, an important factor in that is their inability to hit home runs because they don't have a lot of power in that lineup. On the flip side, those same folks have been talking about ERA, and we've all been conditioned to use ERA for our entire lives to gauge pitchers. But ERA is a very indirect reflection of an individual pitcher's performance over an entire season, let alone a month or two. Okay, the defense plays a role, and the official scorer plays a role, a big role in ERA as well, especially over a smaller period of time. And more and more metrics are available that directly measure a pitcher's performance. And just looking at the starting rotation, we have called it kind of the late Mozeliak era hangover is going to be over us for a while. And like right now, expected ERA, which is expected weighted on base average, which takes into account walks, strikeouts, and the quality of contact allowed, the St. Louis Cardinals have one starting pitcher who is above average in that metric. And that pitcher is Matthew Liberatore, and he's in the 55th percentile. Okay, so he's not even, good using that metric. And so they've been able to paper that over with a bit of batted ball luck and a very good defense. But you're also going to have inconsistency on the starting pitcher front if you're allowing a lot of balls in play, because those balls are going to find outfield grass, and some of those balls are going to carry out of play over the fence, and they've been pretty fortunate on the home run front as well. And I feel like in the last couple of weeks, those realities where a team that performs the way that you would want a team to perform 30, 40 years ago is not optimized to be consistent in the 2020s. And I think we're living through that right now. Then you sprinkle in some of the youth, those types of things, you're going to have a little bit more inconsistency on that front. And so, it's been a little bit frustrating the last couple of weeks in terms of outcomes. But really, I would say, Ben, and tell me what you think, and until the Toronto series, at least the last couple of games of the Toronto series, and then, that no hitter that they had nearly tossed against them in, Milwaukee by the top prospect whose name is totally skipping my mind, and I feel terrible because we run a podcast. At least it's not a Brewers podcast. But until that string of games, I felt like they were still being competitive and playing a high quality style of play. But I feel like they've sort of really gone down into the valley of what the badness can be for this team.
Yeah, well, and I'm with you. And some of this actually, I think I'm gonna maybe touch on in what I'm gonna be looking for. But in short, I'm not as concerned because even in this rough stretch of games, they've tended to be in the games,
Yeah.
right? As we record this last night, that it was game 2 of the Brewers series. They had the tying run on second base in the ninth inning, and there's very few games they've been kind of blown out. Actually, that was something Mo actually commented on during the blogger event as well, kind of saying, this to him was sort of a mark of this team being of better quality than we've seen in recent years. Just that, that fact alone, that like, regardless of the record, they tend to be in games. So yeah, I'm pretty much in the same spot there with you, I think. Um, we have one other Dan who does our social media. He's learned something, Ben, and he just dropped this kind of interesting stat in here. I don't remember who compiled this, but it was sort of a something that every team leads the league in. And the Cardinals was most outs above average. So again, emphasizing the defense kind of having been the exceptional thing there. I'm wondering how long that's going to remain the case with Burleson playing right field, but hopefully Jordan Walker is back soon, because I certainly see that moving in the other direction. But let's move on. Let's get into some of these listener questions, Ben. So first one we have from Cole Morris on Blue Sky. He says, in the latest Royals series, I saw Nootbaar swapping between a torpedo bat and a regular bat. Do you think that he's swapping based on the pitching matchup, or is he just trying to get a feel for what bat to continue using? And Ben, before you answer, I'm curious, can you see what kind of bat they're using? Because I think I'm getting old man eyes. Like if I really focus on it, I can, but I don't necessarily just notice as I'm watching the game.
The HD era, like the quality of video that we have nowadays, and it's really driven home if you see even, like 2006 World Series highlights. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
less than 20 years ago, but like, the biggest stage, the network television broadcast crew, like the quality for the FanDuel Sports Network, which is, let's face it, production-wise, trash, right? Like, still the quality of the definition that we have is remarkable. And like, once you figure out how to idea, like just by where those points are that you can identify the difference, I think it's pretty easy. I don't,
Yeah.
I don't like set out to try to notice it though. So like
Yeah.
I will notice it on occasion, and I think if I were like charting it, I could, but I don't pay that much attention to it. With Nootbaar though, I think it's a little bit concerning because he just seems completely lost, and I 100% believe it's just him trying to get a feel. And with the
Yeah.
torpedo bats, I really believe it depends on what type of mechanics you have and what type of swing motion and where you're making contact and how beneficial that type of bat is for you. And to me, it's
Yeah.
it's very concerning. Like in early June to be late May, early June, you're fiddling around with two completely different types of bats. Like I think that shows just how much of a struggle it's been for him lately.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question. I don't know how much the difference in, change. I don't know how much of a change it is for the player changing bat styles, just as like completely dialed into the player's specifications these modern bats are. So I don't know, but I agree with you. I think he's just kind of trying to find something that works there. And I will say in general, I think the equipment thing we always kind of get like drawn into, but like it doesn't make that much of a difference, right? Like I think if Mason Wynn played shortstop with a first baseman's mitt, he'd still be better than Alec Burleson playing shortstop with a infielder's glove, right? So at the end of the day, I don't know how much difference it makes. And yeah, I assume with Nootbaar, and it would be this would be an interesting question for Jim Hayes or somebody to ask about, to kind of get from him. But from the outside in, yeah, that's my only sense, is just that he's probably trying a little bit of everything to find something that works.
Yeah, and it just, now they're starting to give him the days off and that type of thing, and that's when the guy is really kind of struggling mentally as well as physically, and he's probably just doing cage work at this point in time, trying to figure everything out. Moving on, Jay from the Cardinals Discord asks, one of my biggest problems with Marmol is how often he brings the infield in. In the early to middle innings, I'd rather concede a run and get the man at first rather than hope for the rare possibility that you nab the guy at home. Any thoughts on this or any cool numbers about lateral range infielders lose when they're brought in?
Well, I appreciate Jay's belief that you and I have done research ahead of time for cool numbers like that, which we don't always do. I gotta admit, Ben, I don't feel like I have noticed Marmal's bringing the infielders in tendencies to be especially out of line with just what like major league managers tend to do in general. So uh, maybe you have, but I personally haven't noticed that. I don't like bringing the infield in just in general. I mean, definitely you understand like when it's like the bottom of the ninth or later, and the winning run is on third, like that. So like that situation, it's like okay, yeah, you have to do this, but just about any other situation. And I haven't seen numbers that really break it down, but it is one of those things that feels like you give up a sure out so much more often
Yeah.
than the benefit that you get from those times you cut a runner down at home plate. But I also just have to say, Ben, and this is one of those things, and people who complain about every sport being like over optimized now, like they are kind of right. I don't feel like there's just strategy things like this in general across the league that I feel like I see anybody like just like that's just wrong. Like it feels like everybody's pretty much operating in somewhere within the general band of like optimal usage based on the numbers. So and I haven't noticed Marmol to be any different than that. How about you?
Well, when Eric Fetty is pitching, I usually say something out loud to my television like, "Oh, you think he's only going to give up 3 runs?" Like,
Right. Yeah.
with Fetty or Michaelis or Palante, like, how on earth would you not just try to get every out you can and hope that
Yeah.
it's like 4 run, it's 4-2 in the fifth inning after they've given you 4 1/3 innings, like get them out of there. So it grates against me because it feels like sometimes he will do it with a starter on the mound as if that starter is, like Randy Johnson going against Pedro Martinez, where this is going to be a 2-1 game or a 3-2
Right.
game, and it's just like
Yeah.
this guy is going to come out before the end of the sixth inning, and you're going to
Yeah.
bring in someone who can't strike people out either, and then you're going to bring in another person who can't strike people out, and like we'll be lucky if we can win this game with 5 runs. Like
Yeah.
and so it feels like um, he sometimes does it like we're playing in the National League in 1985 or something, and that's
But
just
I
not
don't
the
think. I
squad
mean,
he has.
no, but I mean, honestly, he doesn't do it nearly as much as LaRussa. Like, if you go back and watch games from the LaRussa era, I mean, there's like sacrifice bunts in the third inning, right? I mean, like squeeze
Yeah,
sacrifice bunts,
yeah,
and just all kinds of stuff like that. And I just feel like back then, you had guys who, I mean, everybody was just kind of doing it from the seat of their pants, and they, like they licked their finger and put it up, to feel the wind, and said, I don't know, it feels like it's going to be a low scoring game today. We better play for one here.
yeah.
And so yeah, to me this is less of an issue than it has been like pretty much ever.
I mean, to me, it's so weird. It's like he believes this team is this great run prevention team, and he does not expect the offense to score, which
So you do
it's
feel
weird.
like this is something that Marmol does and does like more frequently than other managers do.
I feel like the Cardinals have had the infield in more often than the opposition this year,
Yeah.
in the games uh, that I have watched, and I cannot remember a game without the Cardinals where I saw the opposing manager. I'm just watching whatever on MLB TV, or Apple TV Plus or whatever.
Yeah.
And I rarely watch the entirety of those games, so I want to be very clear on that. But I will say, I usually do watch the early innings and then I go to bed, right? So in the early
Yeah.
innings, I 100% believe that Marmol is an above average infield in manager.
Yeah, well, and maybe to Jay's point about cool numbers, maybe this is something you and I could look up for a future one because it would be interesting to see like numbers wise if this happens. And I always do try to check myself on things like this because just knowing that I watch so many more Cardinals games, I think it's often easier for me to remember everything that makes me angry that they do. And so I do so these are the kind of things that I do sometimes try to check myself. So it would be interesting to see, and if in fact the Cardinals are doing that more. I certainly agree. I do not love that strategy. All right. Next question from Daniel Shoptaw, the aforementioned friend of the pod, C70. You know him from Meet Me at Musial and all other kind of spots. Ben, Daniel asks, which current player excites you the most, both for the present and their future? We didn't talk about this ahead of time, so I'm hoping we're not going to say the same guy.
The one who excites me the most for the present and the future, I am assuming this means their future with the St. Louis Cardinals. Because a lot of these guys, I feel like they're going to be maybe not with the team too terribly much longer. But anyway, my answer to that, I'm going to say Victor Scott II because of his center field defense. And he has had a real downturn in his offense in recent weeks. But I still feel like if he's a league average-ish hitter, which I think is a reasonable ceiling for him with the bat, even with his recent struggles, like that outfield defense has taken such a leap forward, and it's so good. And I was raised on Whitey Ball Cardinals, and then got to watch Jim Edmonds patrol the parts of the earth not covered by water, right? Like so, I feel like he's a worthy successor to that, and I think he could be just a generational center fielder of the type that the St. Louis Cardinals have so often had. And that's very exciting to me. And he's also fun and charismatic in the way that, Dizzy Dean and Lou Brock and Ozzie Smith and, Jim Edmonds, those types of players that the Cardinals fan base has, and Yadier Molina for that matter, have so often, the best fans in baseball have so often gravitated towards them. And there's like this false narrative that we like players like Paul Goldschmidt, but we don't. No one cared when he left. We like players like Dizzy Dean and Ozzie Smith and Lou Brock. We like guys who are charismatic and have flair, and we always have. And it's this real annoying thing where people, they're going to love Paul Goldschmidt in St. Louis. And I'm like, yeah, he's okay. Like give me Mason Wynn and Victor Scott II 365 days of the year over guys who play the game like Paul Goldschmidt, like they're a middle manager going to work at a cube farm in an insurance company. That's about the joy they bring to the game and the excitement level. So very excited for Victor Scott II's present and his future.
Well, you towards the end there, you actually picked out the guy I was going to name, Ben, because I have to go with Mason Wynn, especially when we're saying present and future, because we've got all these young guys that are like, hey, this is what they could be. It's funny how fast like we're on to the next thing, right? Like Mason Wynn is a top 10 shortstop in Major League Baseball right now by wins above replacement, and he's 23 years old. I mean,
yeah.
he's the same age as Jordan Walker. He's he's younger than some of these other guys. So I mean, it's funny, because of course Mason Wynn, we've talked about it. He's like every giveaway this season is Mason Wynn, and yet just because of this focus on youth, I feel like so many of the conversations kind of go to Gorman and Walker and etc. So I'm excited by Mason Wynn. I think shortstop also, I mean, that's your cornerstone defensive position. So anytime you feel like you've got a guy there, you've got that position locked up for a while, that feels better than just about any other position. And he's got that combination where the defensive value is high, the offensive, it's plus offensive value and it's plus base running value. And so those are just the kind of guys that I tend to feel really good about, because they're giving you value in so many ways that they're less susceptible to kind of a sudden cratering, because even if his offense falls off, right, he's going to be giving you enough defensive value to be out there on the field. So anyway, I'm going with Mason Wynn.
He also is styling and profiling. So is
Yes.
Victor Scott the second. I mean, Wynn
Yes.
even takes it to another level. He has like different colored sleeve and shoe color combos, coupled with the
Yeah.
Fredbird base running mitt, which is incredible. It's like fluffy. It looks like maybe it's baby Fredbird Jr. or something. Like
I
it's
have
kind of
to
got
admit,
a
I have not noticed this. I have to keep an eye out
yeah.
for it.
It's incredible. And so like he definitely kind of is the total package in that regard. Like entertaining as a ball player, but also brings style and flair and intensity to the diamond as well. And it's a lot of fun.
Ben, before we go on to the next question, I just want to throw a question in here, because this is something I've noticed that's been bothering me. Why is it that after a player, reaches base, the bat boy can come out and they can remove every piece of armor that they have, they can change up all manner of equipment, but for some reason they have to keep their oven mitt sliding glove in their back pocket?
Right.
Like, couldn't the bat boy run that out to him? Why do they have to have that with them?
I think it's just a timing thing. They dump everything and then they put it on while the bat boy is collecting everything they've taken off. And
Okay.
so it's just like now I am ready to go as the bat boy is hauling a bag full of all of my armor back to
Yeah.
the clubhouse.
I'm just gonna say, aesthetically, I don't know that I love every single player having this like giant oven mitt flopping out of their ass pocket while they're batting. But this is the world we live in now.
Yes, it is. The armor and the oven mitts, like everyone's trying to prevent that hand or
Oh yeah,
wrist or whatever injury, like
yeah.
and and
And
so
I don't have an issue with the equipment itself, but yeah, like the batting armor, it's like it's on when they come up to the plate, they reach base, and then it's kind of quietly discarded as we're in between hitters. So it's there's no disruption to me there.
I mean, if we're being frank though, the first base coach should have to wear a backpack with everyone's in it.
Yes.
And then he just turns around and there's a tab for each number. So Mason Wynn would be in the
Yeah.
front because he would be 0.
Yeah.
And like Mason Wynn would stick his stuff in. He would get his oven mitt out, stick his stuff in there,
Yeah.
zip it up, and then Stubby
And,
Clapp would turn around, and we could save the bat boy a little bit of work.
and
And
you know what, Ben? You and I have both had kids. He could have snacks in there.
yeah,
There's a whole lot of things you could do with that backpack.
yes, absolutely, a little an applesauce pouch, a juice box,
Yeah.
for
Some
pitching
a little
changes.
packet of goldfish.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for pitching changes in
Yeah.
particular. Like he could walk
Yeah.
out there. Here, you can have a snack while this reliever. Here's a mini Gatorade. You can drink that.
Yeah.
Um, it-
Imagine the juice box sponsorships they could get.
yes, they could sell. Yes, they could have official juice box partner of the St. Louis Cardinals.
Love it.
DeWallet Inspector asks, with Matthews rounding into shape and Roby headed to Memphis, now can we put McGreevy in the Cards rotation and 86 one of the contact managers who isn't managing?
I feel like DeWallet Inspector has asked multiple questions about getting these guys out of there. So I recognize and understand the frustration. Yeah, Ben, it's by the way, we're recording this on Flag Day, which we all know is the official first day that we can start paying attention to the standings as well. But also, I think this is around the time that you and I, from the start of the season, kind of said was maybe about the earliest that we thought, barring injury or like just complete ineffectiveness, that we might see the Cardinals like transition some pitchers. but I mean, like, look, do I like watching, uh, Michaelis and Fetty and Palante up there trying to induce soft contact? I don't, because every batter, it's just you're just wincing at every batter, right? Like, it's like not in the face, not in the face. That's the experience of watching them. So it's not fun, but I can't. I really can't say that any of those guys has performed so badly at this point that I think it's imperative that they move them out. So I don't know. And again, McGreevy he's young. He's had some success already in the majors, but it's been kind of here and there. I know you and I have had pretty serious questions about his stuff throughout his career, though it seems like he is the best version of himself now. So I guess what I'm saying is, as unfun as it is to watch some of these guys, I don't really feel that it's necessary right now. And so I don't know. I think you'd need a couple more weeks of, if one of them just suddenly is just absolutely getting shelled. But I think more likely if injury pops up, that's when you'll kind of see this happen. What do you think, Ben?
I think zeroing in and artificially limiting this question, zeroing in on Matthews and Roby, neither one of them has any AAA innings. So I feel like they're not pushing McGreevy out. They're pushing the other Memphis filler out of the Memphis rotation. And McGreevy is the quintessential sixth starter. He's like the backup quarterback. He is there for injury. And if they make a move too early, there are two things that happen with the veterans. They're going to have to release them, and then you're moving McGreevy in, and then you don't have a number 6 starter when someone else gets hurt. And let's face it, Matthew Liberatore feels like he's not going to make it to the end of the year as a starter. I'm not saying he's necessarily going to get hurt, just kind of like that's a flashing light at this point in time. And so you're not going to see them reduce their non-existent depth in that way. And this is even though Fetty is one of the worst pitchers in Major League Baseball, one of the worst starting pitchers in Major League Baseball. People like to criticize Michaelis. Palante's gotten some heat lately. Not that either one of those guys are good or have been good, but Eric Fetty is one of the worst pitchers in Major League Baseball in terms of stuff and every peripheral you can look at. Like, he is not good. So if it's going to be anyone, it's going to be Fetty if you're doing it without injury, right? But then you still have two other guys who are just doing the same thing. But I don't think they'll do it because you will artificially limit your own depth by doing that. In fact, you'll totally eliminate it. The other side effect is you're cutting a veteran loose who's been not good but not terrible by traditional measures. And that does have a ripple effect where if I'm a veteran and I can sign with a team and I have a choice between a team that I think will, treat me fairly throughout the length of my contract so that I can hopefully get another one and continue to make money, or go to a team that's just going to, cut me loose in June when I've been okay. Like, I'm not going to go to the team that's going to cut me loose in June despite the fact I've been okay. I'm going to go to the one that lets me perform and have through the end of the contract, because that's what we agreed to. That's our business arrangement. And that'll allow me hopefully to get another one, either in this country or in Asia, as Fetty's case may be. And so you're looking at the collateral effect of, creating a bad perception of the St. Louis Cardinals as an organization if you're cutting bait too early for what is traditionally accepted in the league relative to performance, and they aren't going to do that.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, just as a comp to, Matthews in particular, I think could be a plus major league pitcher. Not necessarily maybe a number 1, but like very good, number 2, whatever you want to call him. And Roby has good stuff too. His minor league track record is so spotty because of injury, but those are kind of like upside guys. I mean, I'll be honest, McGreevy to me, like McGreevy kind of pushing his way in. This feels more like when we were like when are they going to put Palante in over Dakota Hudson? That's kind of what this feels like. And so, anyway, I think we'll see it eventually, but I don't necessarily think we'll see it especially soon. John over on Blue Sky asks, is Herrera ever going to actually catch, say, 120 games in the big leagues, or is he now mostly a DH who can also catch? What do you think, Ben?
I don't think there are many catchers who are going to catch 120 games in the major leagues over the course of Herrera's career. I think the
Yeah.
ones who are going to do that are the ones who were doing it, more than 3 to 5 years ago. Like they just continue to do that, or they're a good enough hitter that they're going to do both.
Mm-hmm.
I think Pages. I don't. Pages is probably the number one catcher, and I don't think he moving forward is going to have a 120 games caught season. It's going to be much more of like a 55, 45, 60, 40 split, I think, moving forward for the Cardinals in terms of catchers. And I think Herrera is probably a DH moving forward. Maybe they could explore left field or first base. He's young enough, and if you give him an off season to work on it, he might be serviceable enough. They're using Burleson in the outfield right now, which is indefensible, so why can't you use Herrera? But I think when you're coming off of like a bone bruise in the knee, now isn't the time to also throw in, running around the outfield or trying to learn an infield position. So I think that's probably something we will hear about in the offseason in terms of alternative fielding positions, but I don't think he's probably going to be catching much more.
Yeah, I'm with you, Ben. And actually, while you were talking, I looked up because your first point is definitely a good one. Just the number of games that catchers catch is not what it used to be. And I looked up Will Smith. I was just trying to think like who is just a really consistent, healthy, like good catcher. And Will Smith's last 4 seasons, games played 128, 126, 137, 130. And I'm not sorting. I'm sure there's a handful of probably DH appearances in there, but yeah. So definitely the total numbers going down. But I think along with what you said, to kind of the spirit of the question, is he ever going to be maybe like the primary catcher? Yeah, I'm with you. I think absolutely not. And I'm wondering if, just given the idea that every team has to have, two catchers, and whether they go sort of like 70-30 or they go 60-40, like however they split that up, I am interested to see, do they feel good enough about Herrera that he could have a couple seasons of like he's the backup catcher,
Yeah.
but then plays DH every day that he's not basically. I'm gonna be honest. I strongly question if he's even good enough defensively to be the backup catcher, because every single walk and single going to second base, it's like watching like a 11-year-old baseball game, right?
Yeah.
It's like, just all right, hey, just hang out. One of the next 3 pitches is going to the screen, so take second base. When that happens. It would be great if or it would be one way that he would really add value is if he could do that, and there would be a configuration then I think where potentially he could be your second catcher. And you wouldn't necessarily also need to have like a Pozo on the team, which potentially puts you in, a situation where you can just maybe build kind of a stronger bench. That said, we are 100% a Yoho Pozo podcast, so we're not advocating that specifically for Pozo or for this year. Yeah, I'm with you. I think he's a DH. He'll do nominal catching this season. It'll be interesting to see if like next season, maybe the season after, he continues to be some kind of a backup. But yeah, I strongly believe they're gonna find him another defensive position. I think ideally it's second base or it's an outfield position, so he can go there sooner rather than later. Otherwise, I think it's he'll be the first baseman the day after Contreras' contract is up.
Yeah, 100% agree. And I think they'll continue to try to trade Contreras. Although I think having a psychopathic lunatic who becomes like a top 5 first baseman in one off season and continues to hit the ball incredibly hard. I know that his traditional stats, are not impressive, but I feel like his second half is going to be, an 850 OPS, you know, 360,
Yeah.
375 weighted on base average, like type second half, or, you know, from the state forward, it would not surprise me at all. And there's
Yeah.
definitely benefit to having those guys. I know you made the comment, Ben. We've talked about the value of having, you know, psychopathic lunatics on your team like Yadier Molina,
Yes.
and that maybe we were
Yes.
looking at this wrong. That the Cardinals were not trying to replace Yadier Molina as a catcher; they were trying to replace Yadier Molina as a psychopathic lunatic, and
Yeah.
they've been pretty
Yeah.
successful on that front.
I agree. Like if I'm like, if I'm in a bar and a couple guys come over and they start messing with me and then like my friend comes up behind me, Yadier Molina and Wilson Contreras, those are like some top two guys to have with you in
Yes,
that situation.
like you started this, and we're gonna
Yes.
finish it, right? Like,
Yes. Yes. This is my friend who said in a interview to be published widely on the internet that he would murder someone for his teammates. And he was not kidding, and no one thought he was kidding.
oh, all right. Moving on. John LaRue, friend of the pod, asks, rank the following on how likely you think they'll be part of the core after this year and even into 2027. I am omitting Wynn, Newt, and Libby for now. They seem pretty obvious. Donovan, too, to be honest. But Donnie plus Gorman plus Weatherholt plus Sagasi with Wynn locked in and maybe Arenado in a Lebowski-sized logjam. And so the players he has listed for us are Burley, Donovan, Gorman, Herrera, McGreevy, Palante, Victor Scott II, and Sagasi.
Yeah, it's a good question. So I'm gonna start with the guys. Well, I'll start at the top. I mean, like I announced that like it was a surprising way for me to answer this question. Um, I would actually put Donovan number one, and I understand what he's saying about there is some positional question there, but Donovan has shown such versatility that I think while I can't tell you for sure if Donovan is going to be a regular second baseman or a regular left fielder or continue to be kind of a multi-position guy. I think to me, he's at the top of this list. I would actually put Herrera number two, and I mean, I tell you, I don't know. It's been a long time since I feel like we saw somebody just announce themselves with the bat this much in this short of a window of time, but also like not in a way where you're like, well, yeah, he had kind of a hot streak, like some wind-aided balls left the park. Like this guy is a legit middle of the order hitter, and you don't get those very often. So like to me, those are the two. I'm gonna say those are like the two locks on this list for me. I think those guys are absolutely core players. I think it gets I think it gets a little hazy past that for
Yeah.
any of these guys. I noticed. I'm gonna be honest. He didn't list Jordan Walker on here. I'm
Hazy
gonna tell you
indeed,
what.
right?
Like, yeah, I might almost, but I don't know. Part of me would put Jordan Walker ahead of some of these other guys, and I don't. I mean, there's definitely question marks with Jordan Walker, but his defensive value coupled with his offensive capability, it's like we've talked about with Wynn about just being able to provide value in multiple ways. I see him having the potential to do that, maybe more so than a lot of these other guys. I mean, just in terms of rest of the list for me, yeah, but Palante is probably close to just because Palante is a cost controlled innings eater who is fine. So I fully expect Palante to be here for the majority, if not all, of his team controlled seasons if we don't see a substantial regression. And also, like, I think that's fine. Like, I think you need guys like Palante. So he's not going to be exciting, but given the type of guy he is and how hard it is to get guys like that, I think he's pretty locked in around here. Gosh, I don't know. The others get a little. I agree. VS2 to me has the real like he has the ceiling that's really exciting. I think the one question with him is just can the offense be sustained at a playable level. I guess just running through kind of the rest. Burley to me is just 100% a platoon player, and I know that they like him. They're playing him a lot now, which I understand given that Walker's out. There's days I'm like, why is Burleson starting? And I kind of look at the options and I'm like, okay, fine. But I think Burleson has we've already seen his max value as a lefty platoon bat. Gorman, I still hope that there's, Gorman is another guy that we would say has a pretty high ceiling, but it's that ceiling's looking less and less likely. Yeah, McGreevy, I think you and I both said, I think, bottom to at best maybe middle of the order, middle of the rotation guy. So some potential there, but I certainly wouldn't say like locked in by any means as a core guy. Like could happen, but I don't know if it will. Sajasi, you want to talk about a backup quarterback? Let's talk about Sajasi. I think Sajasi is probably a good player, and I think Sajasi could very well step up and kind of be, the heir to Brendan Donovan, who is the heir to Tommy Edman. I could 100% see him doing that, but I see people who seem to think that like he's wearing Mark McGuire's number, but he's not Mark McGuire, folks, and like so. I think he will probably be a guy who hangs around for a few years given his positional versatility, but I don't see kind of any kind of superstar player there. So anyway, there's a lot of names, Ben, so I talked for kind of a long time. What are you with me? Are there any significant places where you see otherwise?
So I'm going to actually take issue with the frame that John provides to us, because I don't know if Newt, between the injuries and what
Yeah.
we've seen so far this year, I think the potential there is to be very good. I just don't
Yeah.
know with in particular, like I'm still not sold. Like, are we gonna see a 500 to 600 plate appearance season even this year from
Yeah.
him? I think the jury is still out on
Yeah.
that. I just don't know if we're using the Juan Encarnacion Walt Jocketty definition of core. Um,
Mhm.
I guess maybe, but I think that's hazy at best. I mean, I definitely agree. Like I would put Donovan in there just from the bat to ball skill over Newt. Like I think he is
Me
more of
too.
a sure, and he also, by most accounts, he's one of those baseball rat clubhouse presence guys that managers really like, baseball men really like, and so and his nickname's Donnie Hustle, which Newt is a great nickname, but Donnie Hustle is hey, and his batting helmet falls off, and he wears a headband um, with his long flowing locks tied behind it. So like, hey, that's really fun to think about for 5 to 7 years, right? Maybe like 200 hits a season, flopping into second base. So like that's I think he's definitely a core player. Herrera, I think you're 100% right. But relatedly, he is right-handed, and this team, they have at present, like if you've got uh if you've got Newt, you've got Victor Scott II, you've got Donovan, and you've got Gorman and Burleson. Those are a lot of left-handed hitters, and so
Yeah.
with Herrera, he is a middle of the order right-handed bat that you can put in the top four lineup spots and help break up that left-handed hitting, uh, potential lefty, lefty, lefty. And so when you pair him with like a Contreras for the next few years, that like that's very nice in the top 4 or 5 of the order. And I think like his quality of contact and just hit the way, there are guys who the pitcher is going after, and there are guys who are going after the pitcher. and and
Yeah.
Herrera is a big game hunter. Like he is controlling
Yeah.
plate appearances in a way that we don't have a lot of batters and have not had a lot of batters over the last
Yeah.
several years who can do that. And
Yeah.
so I definitely put him in that group. And Sajasi is interesting to me as well because of his right-handedness at this point in time.
Hmm.
And I think he's a nice complement to a lot of those guys. And his positional flexibility, I think puts him into that conversation as well. I don't, so here's my question to you. Okay. I don't even think Walt Jocketty would describe Jason Marquis as a core player. Do you think he would?
Well, I, I do, Ben, in that I think back then in particular, teams really built their roster around like you plugged a name in at a position, and Jason Marquis was the number 4/number 5 starter when he was here. And so I feel like when they had a guy like Marquis, they like crossed that off.
Yeah.
Like, okay, we don't need that position anymore. And and those guys, there are still guys like that when you plug them in, it's like that, that's your guy. Those are super valuable guys, but we are just in an era now where a guy like a Brendan Donovan can absolutely be a core player, even though it's going to be a little more floaty. I don't know if that kind of answers your question, or what do you think? Do you think he's? Were you suggesting that he was not?
No, I don't think Jason Marquis was a core player. I think he was a complementary player, who was giving them what they needed, which is just keep us in games, and you aren't good, but you give up contact and ground balls. Our defense is good. It'll make you a little bit better. And our offense is good enough that we can win games that you start. Like, he was serviceable. Yeah. He's fine. And I feel like Palante is like a Jason Marquis, and I think McGreevy is too. Yeah. Miles Michaelis, Jason Marquis, however you want to categorize it. But that has value. Like,
it does.
The cost-controlled back of the rotation is an important thing, because then you are not signing the Steven Matzes and the Miles Michaelises and trading for the Eric Fetties, where you have, $8 to $20 million tied up in the for each 3 through 5 spot in the rotation. Like, that's really expensive for a team with ownership like the St. Louis Cardinals. And so I think it's important, but, like, I would not call them core. Like, I feel like Liberatore, like, ideally you would have multiple guys in AA and AAA who can give you that, right? Like, that's the ideal. And the Cardinals used to kind of have that, where we can dip into our minor leagues and get Joe Kelly, and he's going to give us number 4, number 3 starter quality innings for 3/4 of a season.
Yeah. Well, but, Ben, to me, this is what it gets at, is starting pitchers are really unique, I think, in terms of this kind of core or not core, because, like, it's a pretty rare skill set to be able to be a starting pitcher. And I'm not even talking about being a good starting pitcher. I'm just talking like you've got enough stuff that you can go and like stand out there for 5 innings. Like, it's pretty rare, and you need 5 of those guys, and you cannot piece that together. So, like, you can platoon a position, right? You can have a lefty righty in right field. You can have Donovan, who you're going to kind of move around. So you can absolutely satisfy your needs at other positions in these kind of creative ways. Like, you literally need 5 guys that can go out there and be starting pitchers. It's very hard to do. And that's why I think even guys who are not, you wouldn't call them good, like, this is what I'm saying. They're not good, but they're valuable. And so that's Jason Marquis, that's Miles Michaelis, that's, all of these guys. Anyway, that's kind of my take on that.
I can understand that. I think, to me, the biggest wild card here is Gorman, because Marmol in recent weeks has made it pretty clear that in Oliver Marmol's mind, Nolan Gorman is not a core player. He has defined his so-called quote-unquote runway as 300 to 350 at-bats. And to me, this is very clear. Like, he views Gorman the way that I think a lot of people view Burleson, which is as a part-time lefty platoon bat. And if the manager thinks that, it's, at least the manager for this year. Who knows how Bloom and his team view Nolan Gorman. But, if that's the way that the manager sees Nolan Gorman, I just don't really see him. He's going to have to kick the door down to court him with his bat. And, he's so hot and cold, like, starting in the middle of the week, he could go on a heater where he has a 1.800 OPS and, clubs 5 home runs, and suddenly he's the second best hitter on the St. Louis Cardinals for the year. Like, that's his. And even when you see it, like his ground rule double and his home run, like, there just aren't many players, even in the league, who have a swing like that where the ball just, when he makes contact, the ball just jumps. And but he doesn't make contact that often, and he seems caught in between that. Am I going to go hit for power and swing and miss, or am I going to not swing and miss as much and sacrifice power? And when you're at that point in your approach where you don't know, you're kind of a man between two worlds,
Yeah.
and you're approaching 2,000 career plate appearances or what have you, or is he approaching 1,500? I can't remember off the top of my head, but he's pretty far along. And it's just kind of like
he's got a lot more plate appearances than any of these other young guys on this list.
And it's just kind of like it feels like his future in Major League Baseball is outside the Cardinals organization is what I think I'm really getting at. Like, he feels like a guy who needs a fresh start, and it's very clear that Oliver Marmol isn't very interested in giving him, a significant opportunity, especially with the team being competitive. So right now I am not very high on Gorman's future with the St. Louis Cardinals as a core player.
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked a couple weeks ago about him having kind of the widest range of outcomes probably of anybody, because for all those reasons you said, there is still superstar potential in there given some of the like batted ball qualities he can generate, but obviously the strikeouts are terrible. And I will say this, and I'm not at this point, Ben, I really feel like the manager is executing the front office's plan as far as playing time. So I don't know that it's as much Marmol as it is the organization kind of feeling like this for him. And I'm not saying like we should always defer to authority, because we shouldn't, but there is a thing where, like, if your organization is doing well, you want them to be a little bit ahead of you, right? So if they're giving up on a guy, and we're still like, well, wait, but he doesn't have that many plate appearances, and relative to this and that, there's definitely times where they've already seen more than you have, and they're making that decision. And that's what it kind of feels like with Gorman to me, because like numbers wise, I'm like, oh, he hasn't seen that much, it might still be there, but part of me is like, I don't know, like, it doesn't seem like there's much enthusiasm from anywhere in this organization to see more. And so very well they may have seen things that I haven't seen, and they just may be right. All right, we got a couple grab bag questions here to wrap things up. Tom Early on Blue Sky asks, have you discussed how Chip Caray says with RISP instead of with runners in scoring position? This is baseball. We have the time. I haven't specifically noticed that, but Ben, this gives you a chance to talk about Chip Caray. So have you noticed that? And
nails on the chalkboard, man. Nails on the chalkboard. It's entirely possible that Chip Caray, because he does so little preparation for his job, does not know what the acronym RISP means, and he just reads
just
it.
Real quick, so have you heard this?
Oh yes, oh yes, it is very grating to me.
Okay, so I think right now we've gotten at this thing, because we talked about Chip Caray before, who you detest, and I would agree is not a particularly good announcer, but I'm kind of like fine with him. He doesn't really bother me. And I think it's because I am not listening that closely. So I am listening so not closely that I have not noticed this. So I would maybe encourage folks to just not pay much attention. If you just kind of hear just the general tone of his voice, it's not that bad.
It's once a clown, always a clown, right? And he's a clown. He doesn't take himself seriously, and he wants to be funny. And he has chosen that route. And to be fair, his grandpa's a clown too. Like, he wasn't particularly talented, but he was famous for being a clown. And I mean, to be fair, a drunk clown, right? Like, and at least it does not appear, Chip Caray, to his credit, we are not like enabling like an alcoholic type situation, which is what it seemed like with Harry Caray.
I have a feeling they really that was something they really wanted to not do with this hire.
Well, 100%, right? Like, especially after the unfortunate situation with Dan McLaughlin. But like, he's just not funny, and he's not good, and he's not insightful, and he's not prepared. And he also says RISP, which I've never heard in my life. And Yeah, I'm just like, okay, man.
Maybe he's trying to make fetch happen. Have we thought about that? Maybe like
And so it's just one more thing where it's like, if it, what I often think to myself when I'm listening to him is like, my God, man, show some self-respect. Like, you're the play-by-play broadcaster for the St. Louis Cardinals. Show some self-respect. Like, just have a basic level of knowledge and be able to offer some insight into players because you are around the team all the time. And I cannot think of anything that he has said in the last 2 weeks that is insightful about any individual on the St. Louis Cardinals. It is incredible.
yeah, I see. This is it's interesting. We have different takes on this because I don't want him to say anything interesting and insightful, and I don't want him to think he's saying anything interesting and insightful. And that was always my issue with Danny Mac was I felt like Danny Mac was always really trying to be insightful and like wasn't. And so I'm really okay with like I'll be honest, like I love the Cubs radio booth, like you know Pat and oh, why can't I think of the jobber third baseman who's Pat's partner now? Blanking on him. Played for the Twins. Played for the both Chicago teams. Anyway,
Yeah, I know who it is, but it
yeah,
doesn't
yeah, we know
matter.
what we're talking about. Anyway, Paul. But like, it's just two guys up there. Like you could be like sitting next to those guys in the stands, and it would be fine. And that's like a style that I kind of find okay too. And so like Chip Carey, that's where I can kind of stand him is like he like I can like it's just it's kind of like background noise. It's like the guy talking next to me. Like I might pay attention, I might not pay attention. He might say risp, I might be like, did he just say risp? But I'm not. Then I'm gonna just forget about it because I'm back to watching the game. So, but yeah,
All of this is to say, instead of the Chip and Brad comedy 2 hours, that's not funny. I would just really love if FanDuel Sports Network allowed me to turn them off and I could just hear the sounds of the stadium. Like um, I do listen to them and I like to hear like I don't need like deep statistical analysis insight. That's not even what I mean. I mean like you talked to Brant Brown or you talked to Nolan Gorman or Burleson, but it's like they cut away to the cat like multiple times in a game for those insights, and I'm like, what do Chip and Brad do? Like it's as if they don't do anything to prepare for the game, and it's Brad Thompson talking about pitching like a pitcher in the year 2025 is pitching like Brad Thompson in the mid 2000s, and it's
oh,
just like, come on, bro.
I totally disagree with you there. I think Brad Thompson is quite good. I will say, I think he kind of matches the energy of who he's with, a bit. But also, like, I don't know that you kind of have to do that too to a degree. Like, I think it'd be grating otherwise. But I've actually just thought that recently, and I feel like he doesn't go overboard with the analysis. Like, he's not super aggressive about explaining everything. And to me anyway, and we have to note that I haven't noticed that he said risp, so it's possible that I'm missing all kinds of terrible stuff from both announcers. But I have often heard, to me, I've often heard the sense I get from Brad is that he does have an understanding of how guys work now, and and if anything, I often hear him kind of maybe pulling it back around if Chip or somebody's kind of doing one of your like, well, he's got room on the opposite field, and Brad will kind of be like, yeah, it's tough, tough to see, guys don't hit ground balls that way
if
often.
I if I have
I
Chip
see enough of
carry
that.
me, yeah, if I have Chip Carey tell me about how wide open a part of the outfield is again.
Yeah,
I could not care less, man. Hey, maybe you could ask yourself a question. Why is the
yeah.
outfield playing this bad or this
But
way?
but Ben, every announcer who is not Jason Benetti does that. So I just
It,
I hate it too, but it's
I mean,
it's universal.
Chip Carey is the type of man who believes that you beat the shift, but you do not beat a standard defensive alignment.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
and that's my problem. He is an empty suit, but he doesn't even wear a suit because he doesn't respect himself. With bright red glasses, who does not know that RISP is an acronym. I honestly believe that. I think that Chip Carey is so ill prepared that he thinks RISP is a word that someone wrote on his printout when they're feeding him stuff to say. Uh, no, I'm joking. I don't really believe that. But like it honestly though, like it's perfect. Like him using RISP is perfect because it's not a word. It doesn't have any meaning, and it is a surface level reading of the thing that doesn't tell you anything of substance, and I love it. I think it's just the perfect tick for Chip Carey as a broadcaster because he's just so substandard, and I cannot wait until he retires or you know Major League Baseball goes to a centralized streaming platform and they redo how they're doing broadcasters. Although I hope they're still at person in the stadiums. Thank goodness they're doing that again. But I just I cannot stand him, and I'm glad that the Cardinals are good because I cannot imagine listening to him for another season of bad baseball because it's like it's even worse when he's just like offering you nothing and the team's just getting drilled, but he's doing like homer stuff. So at least the team has elevated him a bit just by its play. Uh, Mink River asks, the lack of fans at Busch has been well documented. Do you think the Cardinals have a more aging fan base than other teams? I know a lot of 60-plus-year-olds from outside St. Louis that were Cardinals fans because the team was easy to access on KMOX. Now anyone can be a fan of any team regardless of location.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. And I don't know the answer, but it's definitely interesting to think about. I will say, and again, we were there for the Dodgers series, which it's the Dodgers, so you expect it. But the crowds were good for those games, and just on TV, it definitely looks to me like there's been an uptick. So I think that slowly fans kind of got the message that like this team is pretty good. So we're seeing some fans come back a little bit, but this is more of like a long range question of kind of like fanship in general, and I think it's really interesting, particularly as in all sports we kind of have this thing where our professional franchises are located in kind of cities that were like industrial centers 100 years ago, and the degree to which those cities are still, in that position today varies. And St. Louis is a place that, less prominent in that regard compared to places like Charlotte or, Phoenix, really anywhere on the West Coast, right? So yeah, does that, does that make an impact long term? Interesting to find out. I do feel like regionalism is always going to be really an important part of people's fandom. I just think it kind of naturally happens that people who live around a certain team and area become fans of that area, that team, because their parents and family are fans. Their friends tend to be fans, and St. Louis still does have that like fairly wide geographical swath that is not necessarily being encroached on. So I think they still have that. But the last question here I think is interesting is just about the access, because it is true, like Ben, when you and I were kids, like I mean, frankly, there was the Cubs and the Braves were on
Yep.
cable pretty regularly.
Yep.
So those were two teams that like nationally it was easy to be fans of, which is one reason why those teams have huge national followings. But otherwise, basically wherever you lived, you probably got a couple, or maybe you got all of them, but more likely you got kind of a couple handful of games from the team in your like general area.
Yep.
And it's with streaming and whatnot, it's much easier now to just kind of watch whoever from wherever. So I imagine that will make a difference over time, and you'll see more just kind of people from Virginia that are Dodgers fans and whatnot. I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, I think when was the last time that the Cardinals were like consistently good? And I feel like that era kind of ended 10 years ago. And so what you're seeing is the people who remember, who have that nostalgia for that, like that,
Yeah.
2000 to 2015 era, some of them are getting older. But I think the other reality is that, prices have gone up. There was COVID, which disrupted a whole lot of things. Inflation after COVID. Now there's the tariff uncertainty and inflation there. Things are getting more expensive again. And the Cardinals have been not good for a couple years. Like, certainly not enough to go to the ballpark, where things have also gotten more expensive. And I feel like it's just more a question of, do I want to spend the amount of money it'll cost to go to Busch Stadium, stay at a hotel, park, get tickets, pay for everything in the stadium to go watch a team that's mediocre at best or bad? And I think a lot of people are answering no to that question, and understandably so. And I think part of it also is, like, even if you look at, it's this year, but I don't think it, I don't think we can attach it to a generational thing, because if you just go like 2 years ago, the number of tickets sold, which is the way that they track attendance, was quite high. So I think it really is attached to the poor performance of the team.
Yeah.
Um, More than any other
100%.
systemic thing like age or
Yeah,
something like that.
I think you're totally right, and all you have to do is go back to when the DeWitt ownership group came in. But in the years before that, it was like the worst it's ever been in my lifetime of Cardinals fandom, and lower attendance, and even conversations about moving the team and things like that. So yeah, being good is always going to be the number one thing. I will say, I think the Cardinals have a couple things that have typically been assets for them that not all other teams have, um, beyond just being good. A big one is they do such an amazing job of connecting to their history and having this rich history, bringing old players back, really forefronting that. I think that provides so much value. I think that fans really respond to that. And we have been lucky enough to have an ownership group that does value winning, right? And we can be frustrated that they don't invest more, but they definitely do want to have competitive winning teams. I'll be honest, that's my biggest concern, Ben, is either, DeWitt the third,
Yeah.
comes in and doesn't share that, or even the team is sold, because that's the terrible thing, I think, for all American sports fans is, we're one ownership change away
Yeah.
from I mean, like when I lived in LA, I lived there during the Frank McCourt era, right?
Yeah.
And that scumbag was like selling off the team to pay for his divorce, So I mean, the Dodgers are this juggernaut now. I mean, that was like barely not even quite 20 years ago, right? So, yeah, it's. Yeah. Well, anyway, we're all at risk potentially of that, and certainly could happen to the Cardinals. But I'm optimistic for some of those reasons. All right, Ben, shall we? Great questions again for everybody. Shall we move on to what we're going to be looking for?
Yeah, I think so. Thanks everyone for your questions. We always appreciate it. What are you going to be looking for, Ben?
Well, I guess I kind of hit on this a little earlier, so I don't need to talk real long on it. But I'm really going to be looking closely at run differential. I think in particular if the sort of losing skid continues. So I just did a little math before we started. The Cardinals, as we record this right now, have a plus 16 run differential. Back on like a week ago on June 7th, before they went on this losing streak, they were at like plus 31. So it's come down, but it's still positive. And as we talked about last year, when they were winning games with the negative run differential, that really came around on them. So the positive run differential this year has given me much more confidence that this team is good. It's the sort of how good question, I think, that we really need to watch out for. But they still have a positive run differential even in this losing streak. They've been in most of the games. So as we sit here today, I'm not like too concerned. But should that run differential just continue to go down and down and down and go negative, I think that's the point where I'll kind of be like, maybe this isn't quite the team that we thought it was. Ben, what are you going to be looking for?
I'm going to be, we talked about Lars Nootbaar and watching that during the last episode, how I would be, or maybe 2 episodes ago, I don't know, it wasn't the Kyle episode, I think it was the one before, like watching how his approach at the plate would maybe change because of the, at that point in time, recent struggles he had been experiencing, and it's gotten worse since then, and his chase rate is up about 22%. It's actually over 22% as we record this, and if you compare just even to last year, it was 18%. And so that means chase rate measures when he's swinging at pitches outside the strike zone. In essence, he's helping a pitcher get him out, and we know that he has a very good batting eye, and so I'm going to be watching for walks. That's a very simple way to measure chase rate, because a lot of batters will swing and miss at pitches during an at-bat. That alone doesn't necessarily prove much. To me, it's more like if you're working a walk and you're getting 4 balls and you're letting them go by. So I'm going to be watching to see if Lars Nootbaar is going to be working any walks here as he gets some days off and tries to revamp his approach.
Yeah, I'm going to be watching that too, because early on I said I was going to be watching if he could have his more walks than strikeouts, and at the time he was in the range on that, and I'm way underwater on that bet, Ben. So I certainly hope we see that change. All right. Well, before we go, one thing I did want to let folks know, we are planning to start posting episodes over on YouTube as well. They'll still be basically audio only, so you're not going to get exciting additional video content, but just come to recognize that there are a lot of folks who do like to follow things like podcasts over there on YouTube, and that wasn't something we were available before. So we're going to start trying to post over there. The hope is to post there more or less at the same time that the release in the podcast feed. We'll have to kind of see how all the mechanics of that work and how that happens. But there's actually one already posted over there, and hopefully this one you're listening to right now is going to be posted there by the time you go over there. So if you go to the YouTubes and search for Cardinals Off Day, you should find us there as well. Ben, anything else before we let folks go?
No, summer's finally here. So it really does feel like baseball season, and it's a shame the Cardinals have kind of had a swoon as the kids get out of school and the weather really heats up. But hopefully they can get it turned around, because they're really starting to get into the NL Central part of the schedule in terms of the teams that will be competing for the division and probably a wild card spot or two. So they need to pick things up.
Absolutely. Well, we will be back. It looks like July 3rd is the next off day. We'll be back with you then. Thanks to Devon for the new music. Thanks to Dan for social media. And we'll be back with you on the next Cardinals Off Day.
Go Cardinals!